In the late 1960s, a shadowy figure emerged from the depths of fear and mystery in Northern California. The Zodiac Killer, as he would come to be known, stalked the quiet streets, leaving behind a chilling trail of blood, terror, and cryptic messages that would haunt the world for decades to come. He was a killer like no other, not only claiming lives, but also daring the authorities to catch him with taunts and riddles. The fear he instilled in the community was palpable, an unease that crept into everyday life, turning once familiar places into zones of dread. The Zodiac wasn't just a murderer, he was a harbinger of fear, and he knew exactly how to manipulate it. The Zodiac's story begins on a quiet December evening in 1968. A young couple, David Faraday and Lou Jensen, parked their car on a secluded lover's lane off Lake Herman Road in Benicia, California. It should have been a peaceful night, a time for the couple to share in the innocence of youth. But innocence was something the Zodiac would soon erase. Without warning, a figure approached their vehicle, his footsteps drowned by the silence of the cold night air. The couple was shot point blank, David killed instantly, Lou left to die by the side of the road. There were no witnesses, no reason for this random act of violence, just the cold, calculating hand of a murderer who knew no boundaries. And just like that, the Zodiac's name was etched into the history of unsolved crimes. As the months passed, the killer's actions grew bolder, his presence more unsettling. On the 4th of July 1969, at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, California, he struck again. Darlene Ferrin, 22, and her boyfriend, Mageau, 19, had parked their car in a quiet corner of the park, unaware of the fate that awaited them. The Zodiac approached their vehicle, pulled out a gun, and fired into the car, 9 shots in total. Darlene was killed instantly, while Michael, despite being shot 4 times, somehow survived. This time, however, the Zodiac didn't just disappear into the night. No, this time he made his presence known in the most sinister way possible. He made sure to leave behind his calling card, a symbol, a mark, a piece of his soul etched into the very fabric of his crimes. But it was on a warm September afternoon in 1969 that the Zodiac would forever carve his twisted signature into the public consciousness. Lake Berryessa, a serene and peaceful lake in Napa County, was the backdrop for one of his most disturbing acts. Bryan Hartnell and Cecelia Shepard, both in their early 20s, were enjoying a relaxing day by the water when they were approached by a man in a hood. He was carrying a knife, but not just any knife, a weapon of unimaginable brutality. The man tied them up, then began to stab them over and over again in a gruesome display of power and control. Bryan survived, but Cecelia, her body left to bleed out by the water's edge, did not. The killer, in his chillingly methodical way, took the time to carve a symbol on Bryan's car door, a symbol that would come to define him. It wasn't just an attack, it was a statement. The Zodiac was playing a game, and everyone was his pawn. The brutality didn't stop there. Just weeks later, in October 1969, a cab driver named Paul Stine, 29, was shot in Presidio Heights, San Francisco, in cold blood. His crime wasn't that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was that he was yet another victim of a man who was seemingly above the law. In the aftermath of Stine's murder, the Zodiac mailed a piece of Paul's blood-stained shirt to the press, as if to remind everyone of his dominance. He was no ordinary killer. He was a master of fear and manipulation, someone who reveled in the chaos he created. The fear his crimes instilled spread like wildfire. Lovers' lanes, once places of romance and intimacy, became zones of terror. Couples, once carefree, now found themselves looking over their shoulders, afraid to be alone. The impact of the Zodiac's reign of terror went far beyond his confirmed victims. It poisoned the minds of an entire community. Parents locked doors at night, never knowing if their children would return home safely. The Zodiac had created an atmosphere where no one was safe, where every dark corner could be the next place to meet death. As the Zodiac Killer's spree continued, it became clear that he was not merely a murderer. He was an enigma, a creature of the shadows who reveled in the chaos he created. The brutality of his crimes was only matched by the cryptic messages he sent to the press, the police, and the public. His letters were not just admissions of murder. They were taunts, challenges, and riddles that seemed to mock the very efforts of law enforcement. The Zodiac's fascination with secrecy, with controlling the narrative, was evident in every word he wrote. And the public, gripped by fear, eagerly awaited each new communication, knowing it could bring them closer to the truth or to a deeper mystery. The first of these infamous letters arrived on July 31st, 1969, addressed to 3 newspapers: the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. In this letter, the Zodiac claimed responsibility for the murders of Faraday, Jensen, Ferrin, and Mageau, providing chilling details about the crimes that had not been made public. But it wasn't just a confession, it was a challenge. The Zodiac included a cipher, a 408-character puzzle that he dared the public to solve, promising that it would reveal his identity. This was just the beginning of his cryptic games. Over the next several years, the Zodiac would send over 20 letters, each one more taunting and cryptic than the last. He made no attempt to hide his arrogance, his delight in the panic he caused, and his belief that he was untouchable. The first cipher, Z408, was eventually cracked in 1969 by a schoolteacher and his wife, who painstakingly deciphered the puzzle. What they uncovered wasn't the Zodiac's name, but a manifesto, a chilling statement about his desire to kill for pleasure and his belief in an afterlife where he would have slaves to serve him. The message was a bizarre mix of dark humor and twisted philosophy, a glimpse into the mind of a killer who saw himself as a superior being, playing a game with his victims and the world. But the Zodiac wasn't done. In November 1969, he sent another cipher, Z340, a 340-character puzzle that would remain unsolved for decades. Unlike the first cipher, which had been cracked relatively quickly, Z340 proved far more complex. Despite numerous attempts by cryptographers, it remained a mystery. The Zodiac's obsession with codes and symbols was not just about hiding his identity. It was about the power he held over those trying to stop him. The very act of sending these ciphers, each one a complex puzzle that seemed to mock the authorities, was another way for him to assert control. He was daring the world to catch him while simultaneously creating an almost impossible barrier that kept them at bay. For years, Z340 remained unsolved. The Zodiac's letters continued to arrive, each one more sinister than the last. In April 1970, he sent a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle in which he mocked the police and included diagrams for bomb-making, claiming that he had planted a bomb in a public bus and was planning to set it off. The taunts continued, and the police were no closer to finding the killer. As the years passed, the Zodiac seemed to fade into obscurity, his letters and ciphers becoming more sporadic, but his legend only grew. He had become something more than just a killer. He was an almost mythical figure, a specter that haunted the San Francisco Bay Area. But just as the case seemed to be slipping into the cold case files, in December 2020, a breakthrough occurred. The unsolved Z340 cipher was finally cracked, not by a team of cryptographers at the time, but by 3 individuals, David Orenchak, Sam Blake, and Jarl van Eyck, using a combination of computational tools and their own persistence. When the cipher was decoded, it revealed a taunting message, but it didn't offer any new clues about the Zodiac's identity. The message, filled with arrogance and disdain, further cemented the killer's reputation as a man who thrived on his ability to control the narrative. While the decoding of Z340 brought a glimmer of hope that the Zodiac's identity might one day be uncovered, the case remained unsolved. Investigators had several key suspects, but none of them could be definitively linked to the crimes. Over 2,500 people were investigated, each of them offering a potential lead that ultimately led nowhere. The list of suspects grew longer, with each name adding another layer of mystery to a case that was already mired in confusion and uncertainty. One of the most prominent suspects was Arthur Lee Allen, a convicted sex offender and a schoolteacher who lived near the Zodiac's crime scenes. Allen had been linked to the murders by a number of circumstantial factors. He owned a Zodiac Seawolf watch, which featured a crosshair symbol that matched the symbol the killer had drawn on his letters. He also had a history of bizarre behavior and a friend who claimed that Allen had confessed to being the Zodiac. However, despite these connections, no conclusive evidence, whether it be fingerprints, handwriting, or DNA, could tie Allen to the murders. Allen died in 1992, taking his secrets with him. Other suspects included Paul Alfred Doerr, Gary Francis Post, and Earl Van Best Jr. Each of these men had their own connections to the case, whether it be through their behavior, possible links to the ciphers, or speculative theories based on handwriting. However, like Allen, none of these suspects could be definitively proven to be the Zodiac. Each theory brought new questions but no answers. As the years went by, the Zodiac case became a cultural obsession. Films, books, and documentaries explored the mystery, feeding into the public's fascination with the killer who had never been caught. Works like the 2007 film Zodiac, directed by David Fincher, and books such as Robert Graysmith's Zodiac and Zodiac Unmasked kept the case alive in the public consciousness. The Zodiac had become more than just a criminal. He had become an icon of unsolved mysteries, a figure whose legacy lived on long after his last known crime. Despite the growing interest and the advancements in forensic technology, including DNA analysis and the use of genetic genealogy, the identity of the Zodiac Killer remains elusive. The case is still open, and while new leads and theories continue to emerge, there is no definitive answer to the question that has haunted the public for over 50 years. Who was the Zodiac Killer?